Good morning, fourth grade. For this week, we have been preparing for our Unit 6 test about ecosystems and food webs. Your test will be tomorrow, Thursday. Yesterday, we took a close look at the study guide and reviewed the different parts. Today, we will do a practice test. This assignment has questions that are right from the test and will be very similar to what you will see. You will be answering the questions through Edpuzzle. Please take your time and read each question carefully, as this will help you prepare for your test. Let's get started. Question 1 says, true or false? A food web uses arrows to show how food and energy flow through different organisms. Is that true or false? If you said true, that is correct. Food webs that we have been looking at through this unit show what organism is eaten by another organism to show how they transfer energy to one another. Let's do question 2. Question 2 is fill in the blank. Question 2 says, an organism that makes its own food is called a... What do we call those organisms that make or produce their own food? Is it A, environment, B, organism, C, consumer, or D, producer? If you said D, producer, that is correct. Producers are part of the food web that can make or produce their own food using the light energy from the sun. Alright, question 3. An organism that has to eat other organisms for energy. What do we call those organisms that need to eat another organism for their energy? Is it A, producer, B, consumer, C, ecosystem, or D, food web? If you said B, consumers, that is correct. Consumers are organisms that have to eat other organisms for energy. Let's go to question 4. Now that we're talking about consumers, true or false? All consumers eat meat. Is that true or false? If you said false, that is correct. All consumers do not eat meat. There are some consumers, like herbivores, that like to eat plants. Question 5 is asking us to match the consumer to the correct food. The 3 types of consumers are herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. Let's match these consumers to the food that they like to eat. Let's start with herbivores. Answer on Edpuzzle, what food would an herbivore like to eat? Would it prefer chicken, burgers, steak? Would it prefer carrots, burgers, corn? Or would it prefer broccoli, carrots, corn, and onions and radishes? If you said broccoli, corn, carrots, onions, and radishes for herbivore, that is correct. Herbivores are those organisms that only like to eat plants. Let's try our next consumer, which is carnivore. What type of food does a carnivore like to eat? Does it eat burgers, chickens, and steak? Or does it prefer a mix of burgers, carrots, and corn? If you said steak, burgers, and chicken for carnivore, that is correct. Carnivores like to eat different meat. Now let's do omnivores. What food do omnivores eat? If you said a mixture of carrots, burgers, and corn, that is correct. Omnivores are those organisms that will eat plants and different meat. Now let's go to question 6. Question 6 asks us to look at this food chain. Starts with the grass, goes the bunny eats the grass, The bunny is then eaten by the snake, and the snake is eaten by the hawk. Now, this question says, if a disease were to strike the snake population, meaning that all the snakes will disappear in this food chain, what will happen to the population of hawks? Would it be A, the population of hawks would decrease? Would it be the population of hawks would increase? Or the population of hawks would stay the same? Share your thinking on Edpuzzle now. If you said the population of hawks would decrease, that is correct. If there is no more snakes for the hawks to eat, they will begin to get hungry. They won't have nothing to eat. Then there will be less hawks because when they are hungry, they're going to starve. Let's move on to question 7. Question 7 is asking us to take a close look at this food web. It's asking, what organism consumes the red squirrel? So our choices are grizzly bear, porcupine, C, marten, or skunk cabbage. First thing we want to do is find the red squirrel. The red squirrel is right here. When we find the red squirrel, we want to see what arrows are pointing to the red squirrel that show who is eating it. I only see one arrow pointing from the red squirrel. Once you find the arrow, share your thinking on Edpuzzle. If you said marten, that is correct. We see that there is one arrow from the red squirrel to the marten. That means that the marten is a carnivore who eats red squirrels for its energy. Let's move on to question 8. Question 8 asks us to look at a food web again. I will show it to you in a couple of seconds. And question 8 asks us to select all the organisms the grizzly bear consumes. Our choices are salmon, skunk cabbage, deer mouse, red elderberry, and marten. Let's look at that food web. So which of these organisms does a grizzly bear eat or consume? Answer on Edpuzzle now. If you said salmon, skunk cabbage, and red elderberry, that is correct. The grizzly bear, as we can see on this food web, eats skunk cabbage. It also eats salmon, and it also eats the red elderberry. Grizzly bear also eats the stinging nettle and the grasses and sedges. When we follow the arrows, we see that these arrows are showing what the grizzly bear is eating or consuming. Let's move on to question 9. Question 9 asks us what choice correctly shows the path of energy. So let's take a look at this food web. Which of these choices is correctly showing how the energy is being transferred from one animal to the next? Is it A, wolf, plant, deer? Is it B, plant, rabbit, cougar? Or is it C, plant, rabbit, deer? Or is it D, cougar, rabbit, wolf? Share your thinking on Edpuzzle now. If you said plant, rabbit, cougar, that is correct. When we follow the arrows on our food web, we see that it starts with the plant, the rabbit eats the plant, then we follow this arrow to see if the cougar eats the rabbit. That is showing how the energy from a plant goes through a rabbit to a cougar. I know that it's not choice A and choice D because choice A and choice D really don't make sense. It says wolf, plant, and deer, and cougar, rabbit, wolf. There isn't even a wolf on our food chain, so we can eliminate those answers. And then let's look at choice C. Plant, rabbit, deer. Is there an arrow connecting the rabbit to the deer? No, because deers are herbivores and deers only eat plant. So the only answer that makes sense is plant, rabbit, cougar. Alright, let's go on to question 10. Question 10 is us asking us to study the food web and identifying what type of organism is missing from this food web. Is it A, producers? Is it consumers? Is it decomposers? Or is it carnivores? Let's take a close look at our food web and identify each role. I'm going to underline the word producer with green. I'm going to underline the word consumers with pink. I'm going to underline the word decomposers with blue. And the word carnivores with purple. We're going to go take a close look at this food web and identify each of these different organisms on the food web so that way we can find out who is missing. So at the bottom of our food web we have green grass. We know that green grass is an example of a producer. So let's circle green grass with producer. Now let's follow the green grass this way. This green grass is pointing to a snail. Green grass can be eaten by a snail. That tells us that a snail has to consume or eat another organism. Since this snail is consuming another organism, it makes it a consumer. Let's keep going up this food web. If we follow the snail, we see that the snail is eaten by a frog. That means that this frog is also a consumer. But it's not just any consumer. It is eating meat or another animal, which makes it a carnivore. So we're going to circle it in pink and in purple to show that it's a consumer and a carnivore. Now we're going to keep following from the frog. We're going to go up to the owl. An owl can eat the frog, which also makes it a consumer who is a carnivore. So we will be circling it in pink and purple. A frog can be eaten by more than just an owl. It can also be eaten by a snake. This snake is also a consumer because it is eating another organism. So we're going to circle it in pink to show that it's a consumer, and we're going to circle it in purple so we know that it's a carnivore. Alright, and then the snake can also be eaten by an owl, which we identify as a consumer who is a carnivore. But there's still one organism who has not been identified. This grasshopper is eating grass. It is consuming grass. Since it is consuming grass, it is only a consumer. It is not a carnivore because it is not eating meat. It's an herbivore, but it is still a consumer. Now that we have identified all of the different roles each different organism plays in this food web, which one are we missing? A producer, consumer, decomposer, or carnivore? Share your thinking on Edpuzzle now. If you said decomposer, that is correct. When we look at this food web, there is no decomposer shown or an organism that is going to break down these dead animals. That is the end of our practice test. Please remember to use the study guide. Also use Odaloo and Quizlet And you can also rewatch this video if you would like more practice for this test. You can also visit me during office hours from 2 o'clock all the way to 3:30. You can stop by and I will be there to answer any and all questions that you may have. Also, since you guys will take a test tomorrow, there will be no science lesson tomorrow. So you will take your test and that will be it for science for this week. Your test will be tomorrow morning. Please do your best, take your time, and don't worry, you got this. And I will see you next week. Have an awesome day.